Okay, this lesson for the Koine project class concerns what we might be experiencing, construct fatigue. You recall that in this class, we're engaging Bible languages using lexicography. That is, we turn to the lexicon, which is just a word for a dictionary of a language no longer spoken, a dead language. So we're using our grammar, our etymology, looking up the words, and that's both in the Koine and in the biblical Hebrew. So that those that we interact with and the feedback you all are very acutely aware of now is people have so much energy because to appropriate what they're affirming and sometimes adamantly required very little energy. It's a low threshold of entry and it doesn't really require a lot of thought. For example, often I'm told about what some other teacher or preacher has to say or believe. Former pastors, for example, someone said that one of our former pastors said the church won't go through the Great Tribulation. And I said, is there a text that says through the Great Tribulation? Because the word through is from dia, and that preposition, and those of you who use the languages know that that is indicating something. Well, we found that in Revelation 7:14, came out from, exit out from the tribulation, the great one. We saw in Revelation 3:10 where that church who kept the word of his patience would be kept out from the great trial. So we have out from and we have the great trial that would come upon the earth, and then the tribulation, the great one, two definite articles. So when I brought that to the person's attention and then teach that way, it occurs to people now more often that sometimes people are relieving us from a distress that was never produced from the scriptures. Matter of fact, the Bible speaks of the comfort of the scriptures. So you can really get a little bit exhausted, but as you stabilize, if you will, and you start leaving behind the talk and go toward the text, we can notice a few things here. We noticed when we came to the tulip that everyone, and to say this, I have to give credit where it's due, but whatever Calvinism is, apparently it's the measure of all things, because you all have noticed when someone begins to speak, I was once a Calvinist, or now I'm a Calvinist, or I'm a 1 point, or I'm a 4 point, or I'm a 3 point. Someone said Charles Spurgeon was a 1 point. So you notice that whatever it is a mental model, a scaffolding, a construct, fallible as it is, it still seems to function, good or bad, for all of us who are either for it or against it, which I don't know what being against it would mean, except for the fact that I think now some of you are learning people would rather you have been against it emotionally rather than evaluate it intellectually. But whatever that is, let's just give it. It is has functioned well if you actually want to study and have something to start with, because it's either or, this or that, all nature, all nurture, all determined, all random, all or nothing. And you remember we had, for example, the letter Aleph in Hebrew, just that good example there. Aleph equals one and also 1,000. So we learned very quickly that we have this and also, so that these extremes, for example, the all nature, well, that's total hereditary depravity. It just says all nature, no nurture. And yet everything in the Bible, take the entire Torah, for example, and take the appeals and the commands and the imperatives, the exhortations, the admonitions to teach, to raise our children, and take the proverb, train up a child, take the New Testament letters, fathers, to raise our children, the nurture and admonition of the Lord. All those things, everything about it is child training and teaching and modeling behavior, as in Ezekiel 18:14, for example, so that our children can see empirical observation. So if you start here, if you become, let's say, anti, which you all know that burns out quickly, you just start. But when you start evaluating, which is what you all are doing, and apparently, as I said, Calvinism seems to be the measure of all things. It seems to be the one thing that draws the most interest, and yet, regrettably, unless you're using Bible languages, I don't really know how you evaluate it. Now, English is a Bible language. I don't mean we couldn't use our King James English. And in the near future, as we refer to Koine and we move to Biblical Hebrew, we'll bring in our English sentences from the King James Bible. And I will deliberately use the 1873 FHA Scribner based on the restored Textus Receptus, which was a product from Cambridge University that was catalyzed in 1850 by Baptists who demanded a correct format and that the King James Version be presented rightly and the way it was deserved to be presented so that the commoners who used it could have the best English Bible that could be produced. And that's what we have. So I'll use that one and we'll do that. So here the either or, we've learned so much from that. For example, you remember we learned about when it comes to people say young or old earth, open or closed theism, and yet without studying the Bible, they'll never know instantaneity. Not wanting to know the Bible, they'll never care about H1961, that word ha-yah. There we go. I'm sorry. Yeah. Couldn't remember it. I don't know what happened there for just a moment. And certainly won't notice the difference between in beginning creation. Now that's English. You can notice that in English. And then in chapter 2, this is Genesis 1:1. And then you notice in Genesis chapter 2, you have that statement, in the day, on the day, the day, in the day. So that word day is the word time. So we have in time an account of in time, because in the beginning there was no time passed in verse 1 and no depletion or change in the Godhead, immutability. You remember the question about election, conditional or unconditional. In our systematic theology course at the seminary, Dr. John Owen teaches a categorical approach. Now that's a nice way, a formal way of saying use Bible words. So we started with the Bible words. We started at conditional, we had election, conditional or unconditional, and then we went to Genesis to Revelation and we researched it and then reduced it to a concise expression of 5,000 words or less and assured that the subject was covered thoroughly. So if you took a class like that and you notice either or, either it's conditional or unconditional, that's usually where people study to come to those conclusions, yet that's where we started. Well, we noticed, for example, let's just use sets. You have this disciples or students. You remember Jesus called his students unto himself, and then he reasoned away from them, 12. And then if we want to go and have so we have a superset, a set, and then if we want to mention the one who was a devil from the beginning, that would be a subset. And you could see that would only be one person there. So here we have disciples who are chosen. So you notice what was first were the students. Now they had already been called. They've come out, the called out. This is the assembly, the congregation that walked with him away from them there. Now that direction. Now you notice a lot of people want to argue the opposite direction. And somehow you're picked first. And you remember the before-after question. Some adamantly affirm, I think it's called the axiom of Reformed theology, that regeneration precedes faith, but we don't find that in the Bible. That is, we don't find the Bible showing the verb genao, regenerate or generate, preceding the finite verb pisteuo, the finite verb. So we don't find in the Bible doesn't support that a person is born again before they believe the gospel. And we found that a person is fathered, that conduit through the gospel. There we go. So we learned that. We learned John 20:31. And then we learned 1 John 5:1. Same author, the Apostle John, and he placed the regeneration here. Let's just say this regeneration event. There we go. He placed that between the finite verb believe and the participle believing. So that's still close. And like I said, you can certainly see why it upsets people when they hear regeneration precedes faith. But if we don't stop and evaluate it, being frustrated, exasperated can exhaust us. But remember, we don't really have that, all nurture, all this, like we learned about all determined or it's all random. And you can be accused of this. You remember we found people were accusing. It's called they presume a protasis and then assume an apodosis. And sometimes if you don't just turn it off and go back to your studies and then our own private prayer life, our own meditation, our collaboration. Now you'll receive more courage through collaboration because your confidence will be increased. The more iron sharpens iron, the more you become knowledgeable, you'll be more ready to respond. Because when you say all determined, and if you don't agree with that, for example, as determinism, strict determinism affirms, then you'll be accused of all random. And yet we know we have boule, that's plan, and it is translated as determined. And we have desire. Now, of course, some people just equate those, and that way they can ignore the implication. But we also had that word design. So we don't want to forget about bara, and then we don't want to forget about creation itself. I think that's the word. You can look it up. But catesis, we don't want to forget that all these are here. And you remember we found more features in the Bible than just a one or the other feature. So, but the cure for the construct fatigue is because the people that are primed, and you know this, we're all primed. I remember being thought I was a Democrat when I was in junior high. And that was perfectly acceptable in Arkansas then. And then my father brought us in, his 3 sons, and told us we're now Republicans. I think that had more to do with the 1970 new job acquisition in management at a ammunition manufacturing plant. So he became very pro-gun, very pro-conservative, very right, very pro-life, very pro-constitution, pro all those things. So. But now that's called priming. So when someone said, "Why are you a Republican?" that was my identity as a political party. I said, "I don't know. My dad told me I was." So I wasn't without education. I'm sure I could have become very emotional and defended it for some irrational reason. But that's why apologetics, and it helps us understand just what we're talking about, because you can settle an argument, conditional or unconditional election, and neither person involved in the conversation will ever notice that it's ecclesiastical. They'll never notice first person in Ephesians, us, referring to those baptized Jews like Paul the apostle, and then in second person where it's coextensive, then they'll never notice the ecclesia. The book of Revelation is a church letter to 7 ecclesias. And in that letter, the called, the chosen, and the faithful. So the called, the called, those who answer the invitation, the call, answer the call means you come out through ek. Ek is ex, I've said, was to exit, come out. And then the reasoning out, even the word eklego, people don't notice that. But it's not for us to banter it's for us to have a what we call a Koine conversation, a common conversation where we hope to find people wanting to collaborate. But usually people are so charged emotionally that all they are primed to do is defend. So the cure, though, and I will insist on it for your sake, you notice now that when you're around someone that has a glossary, a new glossary, it's translated new tongues, but it's a new glossary. Word new means unprecedented, right? So when someone has an unprecedented glossary, Bible words, a handle on grammar, while you can even cite the 8 parts of speech without forgetting one. Remember that? So you're starting to become very nimble, and things are occurring to you from the Bible very quickly, and you're not leaving out big things with large implications. So have a blessed day, but remember, we all kind of are lazy. That is our flesh. We want it either or, this or that, all nature, all nurture, or if we don't support all determinism, we're accused of all randomnism. It's like the libertarian versus compatibilism, and no one says agent causation from the Hifil stem. It's like all tribulation, including the tribulation, the great one, or no tribulation. And yet we find the English word after is from the Greek word meta, which is amid, which can certainly, if you think about it, and we do in this class, it's certainly comforting for me, for example, because as long ago as 41 years ago, 1980, I was asking, why are we still here? Well, it didn't occur to me that we can be here until it escalates the tribulation, the great one. It can go global and to the last moment possible, and then we're still assured that we'll be relocated and be kept out from that great trial that will be coming upon the earth, because we're here to keep the word of his patience as long as he wills us to be here. And then he will, as the Bible says, he's never failed to provide us a way of escape. And that's really good news. So, but anyway, this is it, just to keep you from being worn out, because some people say, how do you just keep going? Well, I'm energized by study, and so are you. And I'm energized by learning and having things occur to me. And I'm energized by iterative practice, deliberate practice, and taking the Hebrew language, as you all know, and writing it, looking at the numbers, looking at the pictographs, looking at the word, and listening to the phonetic sound. So you have a blessed day. Enjoy this class. But construct fatigue is really, we're just having to endure people who want to wear us down with talk because they haven't expended energy on the text. So you have a blessed day.